Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. Aptera dropped their July update today, and we have confirmation on the drivetrain. So, lots of information about the drivetrain in this update. And they're going to release a podcast this Friday where they're going to go really in depth into the drivetrain. So, really looking forward to that. But let's watch this together and we'll talk about it. All right, let's get going.
So, we're excited to share that Aptera has integrated Vitesco Technologies EMR3 drivetrain into our production vehicles.
Okay, so I was wrong. It's EMR3, not EMR4. And later on in Discord, Chris McCammon gives us a reason why they went with EMR3 than EMR4.
Although we originally planned to launch with an in-wheel motor solution, the development time required for this technology did not align with our scheduled launch window for customer deliveries. The Vitesco EMR3 is a highly integrated high-voltage drive axle. It combines a permanent magnet synchronous motor, inverter, and reducer in one unit.
Okay, so let's go back there a little bit. So EMR3, it is like we talked about in that previous video where when we found out that this Vitesco was the supplier, I suspected they might be going with EMR4, but they're going with EMR3. And it is a single unit that combines the inverter, the transmission, and the motor all in one unit. So that's kind of nice because you don't have to run cabling between the inverter and the motor, and everything is integrated. Now, I thought for a little while that there would be like a single motor for each wheel, so two motors, but it's actually just one motor that's like centrally mounted. And a lot of people said in the comments of that video, they're like, hey, dude, you can see that there's two outputs for the axles on the motor. So it's obviously one motor for both front wheels. And that is definitely the case. So that is the EMR3. And Steve Ambrose is saying that they had planned on going with in-wheel motors, but the timeline just did not fit. So for whatever reason, Elaphe Motors, it wasn't reaching the timeline. So I guess they couldn't deliver the product that they needed in time. And so they made a decision and they said, we can wait for Elaphe to be ready. And that might delay us a year or two or maybe 3 years. I don't know. But it would be a delay, or we can go with this, which is off the shelf and ready to go now, and we can deliver much faster. And they were developing both of these powertrains in parallel. So the bank will be able to handle either option. So it's like, it's like when Tim was talking to us in the battery thing. Aptera is always doing things in parallel, and they have a contingency plan. So this was their contingency plan. They were like, if for some reason Elaphe cannot deliver their motors, we're gonna design the bank and the suspension to be able to take a standard drive unit. And so this is the standard drive unit they're going with.
This drivetrain has proven its capability and reliability with 10 vehicle brands across more than 20 models, accounting for installations in nearly 1 million vehicles globally. We believe it's an excellent fit for our solar EV. Now, this means a launch edition will be front-wheel drive, making it the most efficient and lightweight Aptera.
Okay, so there's the confirmation. Launch edition is not all-wheel drive. It is not three-wheel drive. It's front-wheel drive only. So that is the confirmation. So confirmation that we have from this is EMR3 front-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive.
Variant possible. We're updating all launch edition orders to be front-wheel drive on the Aptera website. So if you already have a launch edition on order, there's no action required. If you want to wait for all-wheel drive, we'll be sending out an email with the steps on how to update your configuration. Our focus is on validating our front-wheel drive variant with plans to deliver an all-wheel drive.
So that's interesting. You can see the Aptera sticker here. And interestingly, the Vitesco motor is still labeled as Continental. So remember, Continental is the parent company. They spun off Vitesco, but it looks like they still have the Continental labels on their motors, which is interesting. And you see Aptera, the little Aptera symbol there.
Solution in the future. We plan to power the rear wheel and make all-wheel drive available after our launch edition deliveries.
So all-wheel drive is definitely still on the menu. It's just not available yet.
We're committed to delivering a vehicle that best meets your needs, and we look forward to sharing more news about the elegant performance of this drivetrain in your Aptera. Now, I want to emphasize this change ensures our ability to deliver Aptera vehicles in 2025, which we believe is a
So, like, again, this is not going to require more engineering or new engineering or re-engineering the thing. They've already engineered this thing. It's been done in parallel this whole time. So this is something that speeds up production, not slows down production.
most important thing we can do for the company, our shareholders, and our future Aptera owners, like you. For more information on the drivetrain, watch the pilot episode of the Third Wheel podcast releasing this Friday. This is where you're going to meet Richard, our Director of Engineering, who's in charge of integrating the EMR3. We delve deeper into the reasons behind this decision and how it aligns with our goals to deliver innovative and reliable vehicles in 2025. Now, let's get into the exciting.
Okay, so that's what the podcast is going to answer a lot of the questions that we wanted to answer, like why did they switch? How come they're going with this one? And what are the challenges with this one? All right, but let's talk about what we know. So we know it's Vitesco EMR3. Here's from Vitesco's website. If you look at it, the max torque it looks like 2.9 newton meters. That is way too low, so that can't be right. So some places use a period instead of a comma to denote the 1000 transition. So that would make it 2,900 newton meters. That seems way too high. So I think this is supposed to be 290 newton meters. That makes the most sense. And then I looked up some other pages, and that there is confirmation. So basically, max torque on this motor is 290 newton meters, and that is, let me see here. If you want to look at newton meters, so 290 newton meters is 213 foot-pounds of force. Okay, so if you want to go in freedom units, foot-pounds of force, it's 213. Now newton meters just sounds cooler. And then also the peak power output is 150 kilowatts, which is the same as 201 horsepower. So 201 horsepower, where most Americans are used to dealing in horsepower. So 201 horsepower. So that's a pretty good amount of power. And then the weight of the unit, so this includes the transmission, the motor, and the inverter, is 76 kilograms. So if you think about that, if you add the two axles, let's say that the two axles will add about 10 kilos to the weight, you're looking at 86 kilograms total for this drivetrain. If you compare that with the motors, here's the M700, which is the closest Alafe motor. So these are 23 kilograms each. Now this would include the transmission and the motor, since there is really no transmission because it's in the motor. So two of them would be about 50 kilograms. Then let's say that the inverter will add what, 15 kilograms. Then you're looking at let's see, 65 kilograms. And then the high power, you're gonna have to have a lot more high power wiring, because instead of wiring just from the battery to the motor, so with the Vitesco, you're gonna have some high power, high voltage wiring going from the battery, which basically sits right next to it, because the battery's right behind it in the Aptera. So a very short length of cable going straight to here. Now with the hub motors, you're going to have cabling going from the battery pack to the inverter, and then there's going to be one inverter per wheel, so there's 3 inverters, and then there's going to be wiring from the inverter to each of the wheels. So for front wheel drive, you're gonna have 2 inverters and the power cabling. So you're looking at, I don't know how much high voltage wiring looks, but it's pretty thick. It's probably pretty heavy. Maybe all that wiring adds another 10 kilograms. So then you're looking at 75 kilograms. So it looks like the EMR will be slightly more, just maybe 10 to 20 kilograms heavier. Not a huge difference. And of course, the big difference is all the weight here will be centrally located pretty low in the vehicle, and it will be suspended. The suspension will take care of this weight, whereas before it was unsprung weight, and so much of the weight was out, not using the suspension basically to support the weight. So definitely in terms of driving dynamics, this is going to be better. With the right suspension tuning, you can get around this. and probably this would have handled fine, but this is going to be much easier in terms of tuning in the driving dynamic and the suspension and stuff. Okay, so let's look at the power. The max power is going to be the same. So the max power is 150 kilowatts. And then if you look at the M700, I think that the one that Aptera had a peak power of 50 kilowatts per, so all-wheel drive would have 150 kilowatts as well. This one, because remember the one that they had, especially for Aptera, was tuned to have a little bit less power but more efficiency. So I think power is going to be about the same. Now, the torque is completely different. These hub motors have insane torque. So they had a peak torque of 700 newton meters per motor. So if you had all three, that was like looking at 2,000 newton meters of torque, which is a ridiculous amount of torque. This one has 290 newton meters of torque, which is, I think the best way to compare it to is like something like the Mazda. So this is a 2024 Mazda Miata, and that is a, you know, kind of relatively similar weight and size vehicle to the Aptera. And this is a, you know, it's not a crazy quick car, but it's a sports car, and a lot of people feel like it's a very good sports car. If you look at this, the horsepower is 181. The Aptera will now we know has a 201 horsepower, and the, let's see, if we look down here, we're going to get the torque. It's 151 foot-pounds of torque on the Miata, and the Tesco motor is going to put out 213 or 214 foot-pounds of force. So significantly more torque. So a little bit more horsepower and significantly more torque than a Mazda Miata. So I think performance-wise, we're not expecting it to be any kind of slouch. They haven't run the full testing on it. So until PI2 does the full testing, we're not gonna, Aptera is not committing to any like 0 to 60 times or anything like that. I suspect that it will be similar, if not better, than a Mazda Miata in terms of performance, that kind of performance. Now, what other things have used this EMR3? Lots of them. The Honda E, NE1 SUV, that's the one that they're selling in Europe. And then the new, so this is the NY1, and then I believe, yeah, the 2024 CRV is going to use the EMR3. So that's interesting that, you know, the new 2024 Honda, and Honda's a big player. They're still going with the EMR3. And remember, we talked about in the previous videos, lots of different cars have used this, like from Peugeot and Opel, and this is Dongfeng is using an EMR3, and it's like these are the other ones: Peugeot E208, Opel Corsa E, and Hyundai, the Encino and La Festa, and then Hyundai's actually using the EMR4 in a lot of their upcoming vehicles. And so the question is, why did Aptera not go with the EMR 4? And so this is Chris McCann on our Discord saying EMR3 is easier to package, and the EMR4 is not available for smaller companies like us, whereas the EMR3 can be sourced today. So it sounds like probably what's happening is the EMR4, if you want the EMR4, you got to order like, you know, maybe 20,000 units from them, or 50,000 units for them, or maybe even 100,000 units from them. They're not going to give it to you like 1,000 units at a time. Whereas the EMR3, I think they maybe just have a big stockpile of them, and they're like, you want 500 of them? Sure, we'll sell you 500 of them. But EMR4 is not available for the other, and it's a little bit tighter to package and fits a little bit better inside there. And then the other question that everyone's going to want to know is, can you upgrade the launch edition to become all-wheel drive? And they said there's a plan to power the rear wheel. So what would probably happen is that there would be the Vitesco motor to drive the front wheels and a hub motor to drive the rear wheel. And that's something that Aptera is trying to make happen, but they don't want to promise anything. And so he says, I would lean towards no. So you probably can't upgrade it easily, at least. It's not like they already have the wires in there and you just like switch out the motor and then you're good. You would have to like get a new inverter for it and wiring, and it would be like a big production. So probably not. It's probably not going to be available as an upgrade to the launch edition. So I wouldn't count on that. There's a small outside possibility that that's happening, but that's not what's going to happen. Now, people are going to be very they're very a lot of people I hear in the comments are like very upset about it being a front wheel drive vehicle. They want all wheel drive because they live up north, it's snowy. But I mean, if you think about it, just look around where you live. The vast majority of cars that are on the road right now are front wheel drive vehicles. And I know people that live, up in Minnesota and Michigan, and I lived in Michigan for several years, and yeah, the traction is terrible. I drove like a Nissan Sentra, but basically, I think what happens in most of these places is people have two sets of tires. They have summer tires and they have winter tires, and the tires make a huge difference on how much traction you get. And most of the vehicles driving around, even in those snowy areas, are two-wheel, front-wheel drive vehicles, the majority of them. And so I think it's going to be fine. Of course, if you need all-wheel drive, you're going to have to wait. The launch edition is not going to have it. But my suspicion is with the right set of tires, the front-wheel drive Aptera is going to be just as good as like any Civic, Sentra, Camry, Accord, just regular car that's out there. And those are the cars that are driving around in most places in the country. So I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. Like where you live, is everyone driving an all-wheel drive vehicle because of the weather? If that's the case, yeah, probably not going to work out for you. Or if you look around, are most people driving front-wheel drive vehicles? Yeah, let me know in the comments below. All right, so we do have confirmation. EMR3 front-wheel drive for the launch edition. All right, so we'll get into the rest of the update video in another video. But thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think that Aptera is making the right decision. It is much better to get a vehicle out there in the next year rather than wait several more years waiting for in-wheel motors to be ready for production. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. So Elafe actually put out a statement, and so they said on LinkedIn, they said we have some important news to share. So this dropped like immediately after the Aptera update. I think they're kind of somewhat coordinating. Aptera told them, "Hey guys, we're gonna release it on this day." So Elafe had a statement kind of ready to go. And so we have some important news to share. While Elafe continues to support Aptera's mission, we have been focused on working with multiple legacy OEMs as they begin to adopt this new technology. Newcomers like Aptera are important clients in pushing technological and time to market boundaries. Elafe's custom wheeled-in motors were intended for the Aptera due to their inherent efficiency and enablement of advanced powertrain architecture. In 2022, Elafe completed the development of motors and achieved the anticipated results, demonstrating performance and efficiency of this cutting-edge technology. Despite the impressive performance of the hub motors, Aptera has decided to adopt an already mass-produced legacy e-axle system for the front wheels. This decision is aimed at ensuring timely integration and cost effectiveness while still considering the hub motors as an option for the rear wheels in all-wheel drive Aptera models. So I think like both companies are basically trying to save face during this thing a little bit. So Elafe is saying, hey, we developed this motor. It was great. If you look at this thing, we had this thing ready. We developed it. They tested it internally. They were able to achieve this 100 watt hours per mile of consumption. So it was efficient, but Aptera decided to go another way. And then Aptera is saying, you know what, Elafe wasn't ready to produce. So I think they're still wanting to work together in the future. Elafe feels a little snubbed, I think, because Aptera wasn't willing to wait for them. And Aptera is like, hey guys, like we just can't wait anymore. We got to get the show on the road. So sorry, it's just not ready right now. And so when you guys are ready, like let us know. Then we'll talk. We still want to work with you guys. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. So Alafe's like, hey, we made a good motor. Sure, it's not like ready for prime, like we can't do mass production yet or something. I mean, they're not saying that, but that's kind of, you can read between the lines. That's obviously Aptera's like, hey, we like their stuff. We like the company, we like the people, we like the motor and the technology, but they're just not ready. Like we can't wait any longer. Like we need to, people are tired of waiting. We got to get the thing out. And Alafe's like, hey, we made a cool motor. Just like wait a little bit, and we can do it for you. But I think Aptera in the end is making the right decision. Their chief commerce officer, he's like in charge of, he's basically their marketing guy. He said, 2023 was just a dreadful for startup funding. So basically, I think that's the biggest problem. Aptera is a startup. They don't have lots of money. Alafe is a startup. They don't have lots of money. One of the two partners has to have a lot of money to fund the development of this thing. So I think Aptera is like, hey, we don't have the money to fund the development of this thing. We're going to go with an established solution. Boom. And then Alafe is like, hey, you know what? We don't have the money to fund this thing. We're going to talk to legacy OEMs. They have the money, and they're going to help us fund this development of this thing. So I think both startups are wisely choosing to partner with established companies with the funding that they need. And they realize like, hey, like we were young, scrappy startups. We had great ideas, but one of us has to have money to fund this thing. There kind of has to be, I guess, from a financial sense, an adult in the room a little bit. Just like from a purely funding standpoint. And so I think that's what's going on. And so Alafe's like, we're going to need to partner with someone with lots of money. And Aptera's like, we're going to need to partner with some established people with lots of money that can just deliver however many powertrains that we need. And so Alafe's not saying who the legacy people they're working with are, but Aptera's like, yeah, we're going to work with Vitesco, Continental. They're huge. They've made a million of these things, and it's driving around in cars for the past several years. So it's a known factor. We know they can deliver. We know this thing works. So we're gonna go with that. And I think in the end, that is probably the right decision. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.